The screams of a dying star echoed through the crystalline halls of the Galactic Union's Grand Assembly. Ambassador Zylax stood at the observation deck, watching the ceremonial nova projection that marked the opening of each council session. His iridescent scales rippled with anxiety as he clutched the quantum data crystal containing humanity's fate. In 6 hours, he would either elevate an entire species to the stars or condemn them to isolation. Still rehearsing your defense of the primitives, the acidic voice of Ambassador Krell slithered through the air. The Proximan's eye stalk swayed with barely concealed disdain as he approached, his ceremonial robes dragging across the polished floor. Zylax's scales shifted to a deep azure of determination. "They're not primitives, Krell. You've never even met a human." "I don't need to meet a virus to know it's dangerous," Krell chittered, his secondary mandibles clicking in amusement. "The data speaks for itself. 2 global wars in a single century, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction. They're savages with technology they're not ready to handle." The Centaurian ambassador turned to face his longtime rival. In the artificial light, his towering frame cast a shadow over the smaller Proximan. "You've read only what you wanted to read, Krell. Did you even look at the full report?" "I saw enough." Krell's eye stalks pulsed with ultraviolet patterns of superiority. "The vote is a mere formality. The Assembly will never accept such a volatile species into our ranks. You're wasting your time." As Krell glided away, Zylax returned his gaze to the nova projection. His mind drifted to his first encounter with humans, 15 cycles ago on the mining colony of New Vega. The memory still burned bright, the day that changed everything he thought he knew about the species. The Assembly chamber's warning chimes began to sound, their crystalline tones announcing the imminent start of the session. Representatives from over 3,000 civilizations would soon take their places in the grand amphitheater. Some traveled for months through fold space to attend this historic vote. Zylax activated his neural interface, reviewing his presentation one final time. The faces of countless human heroes flickered through his mind. Sarah Chen, the firefighter who gave her life-saving alien tourists. James O'Connor, whose medical breakthrough saved billions. Maria Rodriguez, who prevented an antimatter catastrophe at the cost of her own existence. But it was the last file that made his scales shift to the deep purple of resolve, the neural recording of Thomas Wright, the boy who changed everything. Ambassador Zylax, a melodic voice interrupted his thoughts. "The Assembly awaits." Taking one final look at the artificial nova, Zylax straightened his ceremonial sash. He had spent 3 Earth years preparing for this moment. 3 years gathering evidence, conducting interviews, and building a case that would challenge everything the Galactic Union thought they knew about humanity. The massive doors of the Assembly chamber began to part, revealing row upon row of representatives. Their combined bioluminescence created a living aurora of colors that danced across the dome. In the center, the speaker's platform awaited a singular point of focus in a sea of alien faces. Zylax took his first step forward. The time had come to tell them about the helpers. "Hey, stargazers, before we dive deeper into the story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and activate those notifications to stay updated on the latest intergalactic tales. Let us know in the comments which planet, star system, or Earth location you're tuning in from. Now, let's return to the Grand Assembly." The speaker's crystalline voice resonated through the vast chamber. "The Assembly recognizes Ambassador Zylax of Centauri Prime, presenting the case for Earth's admission to the Galactic Union." Zylax ascended the luminescent platform, his scales now a kaleidoscope of shifting colors that reflected his inner turmoil. 3,000 pairs of eyes, some compound, some singular, some existing in dimensions barely comprehensible to 3-dimensional beings, focused on him. "Esteemed representatives," he began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "Before I present my evidence, I ask you to participate in a simple exercise." He raised his primary appendage, activating the quantum holographic array. The chamber darkened, and suddenly, every representative found themselves immersed in a perfect simulation of a human emergency room. The chaos was immediate and intentionally overwhelming. Beings of various species recoiled as human doctors and nurses rushed past them, their movements urgent but precise. A young human doctor performed cardiac massage on a dying Andromedian, her hands moving with desperate determination despite the toxic atmosphere leaking from the alien's breathing apparatus. "This is Dr. Elena Santos," Zylax narrated, his voice cutting through the hyper-realistic simulation. In this moment, she knows the Andromedian's atmospheric mixture is slowly killing her. She has approximately 3 minutes before permanent lung damage occurs. Yet she continues. The simulation froze, and Zylax allowed the silence to build. Representatives, how many of you would continue life-saving procedures, knowing each breath brought you closer to death? The chamber erupted in murmurs. A Pleiadian representative's light patterns flickered in protest. One example of irrational behavior does not justify. Then let me show you 10,000 more, Zylax interrupted, his scales flashing challenge red. The holographic array burst into life again, this time displaying a rapid sequence of similar scenes from across Earth's history. But it was the next simulation that silenced every voice in the chamber. The representatives found themselves in the midst of humanity's first contact event, specifically in the New Denver colony during the Great Quake of 2150. Young Thomas Wright's final moments played out before them in excruciating detail. The 13-year-old human child's neural patterns displayed in real time as he made the split-second decision to shield a young Gabian with his own body as their habitat dome collapsed. What you're witnessing, Zylax explained, his voice thick with emotion, are the actual thoughts of a human child in his final moments. Notice, there is no hesitation, no calculation of benefit, no consideration of species difference, only the pure instinctive drive to protect another living being. The chamber remained deathly quiet as Thomas's final neural patterns played out. His last thought, translated into universal standard, blazed across the dome. Mum always said, to help others. Ambassador Krell's voice cut through the silence like a plasma blade. This is emotional manipulation. The assembly will not be swayed by cherry-picked examples of aberrant behavior. Zylax's scales shifted to a pattern that no one in the chamber had ever seen before, a complex swirl of colors that seemed to capture every emotion at once. Cherry-picked? Then perhaps, Ambassador Krell, you would care to explain this? The holographic array hummed to life once more, but this time, what it revealed would change the course of the debate forever. The holographic array transformed the chamber into a vast data constellation, each point of light representing a documented incident of human intervention in crisis situations across the galaxy. Thousands of lights filled the space, forming a pattern that left the assembly in stunned silence. For the past 3 Earth years, Zylax announced, his scales pulsing with intensity, I have personally collected and verified every instance of human response to emergency situations involving non-human species. What you see before you is not a random sampling. This is all of them. Every single one. With a gesture, he highlighted a cluster of lights. The Rigel mining disaster, humans represented less than 2% of the workforce, yet accounted for 89% of successful rescue attempts. Another gesture. The Betelgeuse plague. Human medical volunteers had the highest mortality rate among aid workers because they refused to abandon their patients. Ambassador Krell's eye stalks twisted in agitation. These statistics can be manipulated. Then, let us examine the neural records. Zylax interrupted, his voice gaining strength. The chamber filled with thousands of human thought patterns, each one captured during moments of crisis. Notice the consistency. The pattern is undeniable. The data swirled around the chamber, forming a complex neural map. In 98.7% of crisis situations involving immediate danger to life, humans display an instant, almost instinctive drive to assist, regardless of species, regardless of risk, regardless of prior contact or diplomatic relations. The Arcturian representative, their crystalline form shimmering with interest, spoke for the first time. You speak of instinct, Ambassador Zylax, but isn't that precisely what concerns us? These humans appear to lack the rational judgment to preserve their own lives. Zylax's scales shifted to a deep, resonant blue. Ah, but that's where you're wrong. He brought up a new hologram, a human brain scan. This is where it gets fascinating. Humans are fully aware of the risks. Their threat assessment capabilities are actually quite sophisticated. They choose to help despite understanding the danger, not out of ignorance of it. The chamber erupted in discussion as Zylax projected his next piece of evidence, the Titan incident. The representatives watched in silence as Amanda Chen, a maintenance worker, manually vented a radiation leak that was threatening an alien nursery pod. The neural recording showed her clear understanding that the action would be fatal. Her last message to her family, Zylax said softly, I couldn't let them die. they were just babies. But it was his next revelation that would change everything. Representatives, what if I told you that humanity's so-called violent nature, the very thing we fear, is precisely what makes them uniquely qualified for membership? The holographic array shifted again, and what it revealed caused several representatives to emit involuntary stress signals. Zylax was about to present the most controversial argument ever made in the history of species admission hearings. The holographic array transformed into a split screen showing two parallel scenarios. On one side, a pride of Earth lions hunting their prey, on the other, human soldiers in the heat of battle. "Observe," Zylax commanded, his scales shifting to a deep emerald of revelation. "What do you see?" The Syrian representative's tentacles writhed. "Violence, primitive aggression. You're making our point for us, Ambassador." "Look closer," Zylax urged. The images zoomed in, focusing on brain patterns and neural responses. The lions, like most predatory species, show pure hunting instinct, no moral consideration, no emotional conflict. But the human neural patterns blazed with complex emotions, fear, determination, conflict, and most importantly, restraint. "Humans aren't naturally violent," Zylax declared. "They're naturally protective. Their capacity for violence exists as a tool, one they've evolved to use in defense of others. They're not predators, they're guardians." The chamber erupted in protests, but Zylax was ready. The hologram shifted to show the Mars colony crisis of 2164. As the dome began to crack, security footage showed hundreds of humans forming living chains, using their bodies as shields to protect non-human civilians from debris. "Name another species," Zylax challenged, "that consistently chooses to place themselves between danger and strangers. Name another species that runs toward disasters instead of away from them. Name another species that would sacrifice their lives for beings they've never met, simply because they can't bear to watch them suffer." Ambassador Krell's eye stalks trembled with rage. "This is absurd. Their history," Zylax cut in, his scales flashing crimson, "shows a species learning to channel their protective instincts. Yes, they've made mistakes. Yes, they've fought wars. But look at how they fight." The hologram displayed scenes from human conflicts, but with a twist, showing not the violence, but the aftermath. Humans treating enemy wounded, humans sharing food with prisoners, humans risking their lives to save civilians on both sides. "Even in war," Zylax continued, "they can't stop helping. Their medical personnel treat friend and foe alike. Their soldiers risk their lives to save civilian populations, even those of their enemies. They create rules of warfare specifically to protect the vulnerable." The Arcturian representative chimed in, their crystalline form pulsing with curiosity. "You're suggesting their violent capability is a safeguard?" "Precisely!" Zylax's scales rippled with excitement. "Humans don't just protect their own, they protect anyone they perceive as vulnerable. Their capacity for violence isn't a bug, it's a feature, one that could serve the Galactic Union in ways we desperately need." The hologram shifted one final time, showing a map of recent piracy incidents in the Outer Rim. "While we debate, criminal syndicates prey on our weakest members. The Drachnid slave trade continues. The Vorax Corporation exploits developing worlds. We need guardians, representatives. We need helpers who aren't afraid to stand up to bullies." Zylax paused, letting his words sink in. "Humanity isn't perfect, but they possess something unique in the galaxy, both for the true reason. The principle disagrees with the oppressor, battles with the weak, fights for territory, not for resources, but for the simple principle that the strong should protect the weak." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in, but before anyone could respond, the emergency alert system blared to life. A crisis was unfolding on one of the lower levels of the station, a catastrophic failure in the environmental systems. And what happened next would provide the most powerful evidence of all. The emergency klaxons wailed through the Grand Assembly chamber as red warning lights bathed the representatives in an ominous glow. The station's AI announced in multiple languages, "Critical failure in Environmental Block 7. Toxic gas leak detected. All beings please evacuate immediately. This is not a drill." Environmental Block 7, the nursery level, where representatives' children were kept during assembly sessions. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives scrambled to access their neural feeds, desperately trying to contact their children. The station's structural integrity alerts blared warnings of potential containment failures. Then something unexpected happened. The human diplomatic attachés, who had been quietly observing from their designated observation area, were already moving. Without hesitation, without orders, without protective gear, they sprinted toward the emergency exits. And they pointed at games opposite. What are they doing? The Proximam representative's eye stalks twisted in confusion. The lower levels are sealed. Zylax Gale shifted to a knowing amber. Watch, he said quietly. The main display switched to security feeds from Block 7. The human diplomats had split into teams, their actions coordinated despite no apparent communication. They were using their formal wear as makeshift filters, tearing expensive fabric into strips to create basic protection for the children. Sarah Mitchell, third assistant to the human ambassador, was already organizing an evacuation chain, directing children of various species toward the emergency pods. Her neural patterns, displayed in real time on the assembly screens, showed elevated fear responses, but they were completely overshadowed by a singular focus: save them all. The atmospheric seals are failing, someone shouted. The toxic gas was spreading faster than the containment systems could handle. That's when James Chen, human medical liaison, did something that silenced every critic in the chamber. He removed his emergency breather and gave it to a young drachnid child, knowing full well the atmospheric composition would be lethal to human lungs within minutes. The assembly watched, transfixed, as the humans worked with desperate efficiency. They weren't just evacuating the children, they were comforting them, carrying those who couldn't move quickly enough, using their own bodies as shields when ceiling panels began to fall. Ambassador Krell's mandibles clicked rapidly. They'll die, the gas concentrations are… No, Zylax interrupted softly. Look at their neural patterns. They're fully aware of the risks. They're choosing this. The security feeds showed Marcus Wong, cultural attaché, holding up a failing support beam so a group of young Arcturians could crawl to safety. His muscles strained against the weight, his skin already showing signs of chemical burns. Yet his neural patterns displayed no hesitation, no regret. Then came the moment that would be replayed in every history class across the galaxy for generations to come. The final group of children was almost to safety when the structural supports began to give way. Without a word, without even a moment's hesitation, the human diplomats formed a human chain, creating a living bridge across a growing chasm. "I'm always said to help others," one of them was heard saying through gritted teeth, echoing young Thomas Wright's last words from years ago. As the last child reached safety, the humans' vital signs were critical. Emergency medical teams rushed in, but for some, it was too late. The assembly chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. The representatives stared at the final neural readings of the human diplomats, each one showing the same pattern. Absolute certainty in their choice to help, regardless of the cost. Zylax's scales had shifted to a deep, reverent purple. He didn't need to say anything more. The evidence spoke for itself. If you're loving this journey through space and time, smash that like button into another dimension. Let's hit 1 million quantum likes across all parallel universes. And if you're new here, join our intergalactic family by subscribing and activating those notification crystals. Now, let's return to the assembly chamber for this historic moment. The medical teams had barely cleared the chamber when the speaker called for order. The emergency had passed, but its impact lingered in the stunned silence of the representatives. 12 human diplomatic staff had been rushed to advanced medical treatment. 4 would never return home. Zylax stood motionless at the podium, his scales now a deep, mourning black. He had prepared countless arguments, gathered years of evidence, but nothing he could say would be more powerful than what they had just witnessed. The Arcturian representative was the first to rise, their crystalline form resonating with a frequency that indicated deep emotion. "I move to proceed directly to the vote." "Seconded," came the unexpected voice of Ambassador Krell, his eye stalks lowered in what appeared to be shame. The speaker's voice echoed through the chamber. "The motion has been made and seconded. All representatives, prepare your neural interfaces for voting." The massive voting matrix materialized above the chamber, 3,000 nodes representing each member civilization. As per tradition, the vote would be public, each decision visible to all. "The question before the assembly," the speaker announced, "is the admission of humanity to the Galactic Union. Cast your votes now." The first light appeared in the matrix, bright green for acceptance. Then another, and another. Like a cascade of falling stars, green lights began illuminating across the display. A few red lights of rejection appeared, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the growing wave of green. Ambassador Krell's vote appeared green. The Proximan's eye stalks twisted toward Zylax. "They have earned their place," he said simply. When the final vote was tallied, the result was unprecedented in Galactic Union history: 29-47 in favor, 53 against. The speaker's voice carried a note of awe. "The vote is recorded. Earth is hereby admitted as a full member of the Galactic Union, with all rights and responsibilities therein. Ambassador Zylax, you may inform your human colleagues." Begging the Assembly's pardon, Zylax interrupted, his scales shifting to a solemn blue. "But I believe we should inform the families of the fallen first. They deserve to know their loved ones did not die in vain." The chamber fell silent again, this time in respect. The speaker nodded. "So noted. This assembly stands adjourned." As the representatives filed out, many stopped to look at the final display still hovering in the air, the neural patterns of the human diplomats in their last moments. Each one showed the same thing. Not fear, not regret, but a pure, unwavering determination to help others. Zylax remained at the podium, his scales now showing a complex pattern of grief and triumph. He activated his neural interface to compose the messages to Earth. How does one tell a species they have been accepted into the galactic community, while simultaneously informing families of their losses? But then he remembered Thomas Wright's mother's words after losing her son. "That's what humans do. We help, no matter the cost." As he began to write, Zylax finally understood what humans had known all along, that the greatest civilizations aren't built on technology or power, but on the simple willingness to help others, even at the cost of everything. The age of humanity in the Galactic Union had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Wow, what an incredible journey through the stars! I can't believe we've reached the end. This story has truly touched hearts across the galaxy. If this tale of humanity's courage and compassion moved you, don't forget to smash that quantum like button into another dimension. Hit subscribe to join our intergalactic storytelling family. Activate those notification crystals to catch more epic space tales. Share this with your fellow beings across all star systems. Special thanks to all our amazing viewers, from Earth to the Andromeda Galaxy. Your support has been out of this world. Drop a comment below telling us, what was your favorite moment? Which human hero touched your heart the most? What stories would you like to hear next? Until our next cosmic adventure, keep helping others and watching the stars. This is your favorite space storyteller, signing off.